Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film Wicked. All right, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for Wicked?
Elphaba, a misunderstood young woman because of her green skin, and Galinda, a popular girl, become friends at Shiz University in the Land of Oz. After an encounter with the wonderful Wizard of Oz, their friendship reaches a crossroads.
And indeed, that's the dramatic cliffhanger at the end of the movie. The crossroads.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, in Movies and Us tradition, we're going to start off with our one-sentence summaries. Sarah, what is yours for Wicked? Part 1, really.
Honestly, though, mine is, it's not easy being green.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, she's such a cool character. Oh my God. Can't wait to talk about that. I'm like, yeah, I'll be green if I can be that cool, man. My one-sentence summary is, Cynthia Erivo is that girl.
She is. Yes. She is. She always has been. Everyone needs to give her well overdue flowers. Like, yes, she is that
really,
girl.
Though. Yeah. Much to talk about with her performance in this. So before we dive into our thoughts about the movie, I think it could be helpful context for all of our listeners that they hear about our relationship to Wicked thus far. And I think that will really shape perhaps our thoughts and perspectives about this movie, this filmed version of this iconic Broadway musical. So, Sarah, what is your relationship to Wicked?
Yeah, I first discovered the musical, I think, in like 2007-ish. And it became my entire personality for a little while. I was real obsessed with Wicked. I love this musical. I've listened to the original cast recording more times than I can count. I was able to see it when I was in college, which was great. And I was so obsessed that I even read the book Wicked, which is very different than the musical, and like the sequel and like a couple other Gregory Maguire books because I was so like obsessed with this world. So yeah. Little obsessed with Wicked. I really love it and have for a very long time. So I have just a lot of attachment to this musical. What about you?
Which is going to make your thoughts about this movie extra interesting to me. I've been so intrigued. Throughout watching this whole movie, I was just thinking, is she upset right now? Or is she just glowing, getting to be back in this world and back into all of the musical numbers? So that was the meta question for my movie going experience for Wicked. My relationship to Wicked is basically not much before this movie. I was around all of the yous of the world that absolutely adore this musical. I mean, it is really one of the most iconic, most famous Broadway musicals ever to exist. And I think you and I also grew up in that time period where it was all the rage at the time too. So it's been really neat seeing everyone and their mother and their friends and their whole families go to this movie, and it feels so nostalgic and exciting to see this on the big screen. My entire social media feed while this was coming out was literally everybody going to see it and just being like, I cried so much about this movie. So I'm definitely just watching everybody just absorb and absolutely love this. So yeah, that was my relationship to Wicked before watching this. I actually didn't know the full story. I actually listened to a lot of the songs, but didn't know the specific plot points. So that was actually kind of fun for me, is hearing the songs now in context of the characters and their story arcs was extra fun for me. So that will shape my perspective about this movie, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's really fun that people are discovering Wicked for the first time. Like it really feels like, you know, all the musical theater nerds, we have had this insider knowledge for so many years, and now everybody else is now being able to like take part and enjoy this story and this incredible music. So I think it's really cool that, you know, the musical theater can be so limiting because it costs so much more money. Like, it has a higher barrier to entry for people to experience these stories. And, you know, unless you're a weirdo like me and you'll just listen to the albums without having any problem with that. But there's just such a high barrier to entry to the theater for a lot of people. And so a movie like this can share these stories with the masses. And that's just been really, really cool to witness. So it's like, yes, this thing that I've loved for so many years, now everybody else loves it. This is very exciting.
Yeah. You're like, I was there first, but I'm glad you finally caught up and got the memo. Yeah. It's been really fun to see. And I think we're like in that like age range, and like we're at that like generational turnover time period where it's fun to revisit the things that we loved when we were kids too, and when we were younger, and just to rediscover and bask in all of that again is really fun. So it's been so cool seeing people share those stories of like, I grew up listening to this whole soundtrack. I know every word of all the songs. So please don't go and watch this with me unless you want the sing-along version. So it's fun to see everyone kind of rediscover their joy for this again. Okay, that was some fun build-up to the big question that I have, which is, Sarah, did this filmed version of Wicked work for you or not?
So I had to separate while watching that this is a different thing. This isn't the thing that I love. And so like all throughout there would be, because some of the songs are different. And so there would be like a change in the song. And my first thought is like, ugh, that's wrong. And then I'd have to be like, no, Sarah, this is a different thing. This is a different version. And that's okay. You can enjoy this as its own separate thing, not the thing that you love. And that is okay. And so like the self-talk that I had to do throughout this entire movie was so excessive because of my long-standing obsession with Wicked. But this is a very well done movie musical. Obviously, we already mentioned it. Cynthia Erivo is incredible. Like, I was really skeptical about this film initially because I'm always skeptical of movie versions of musicals. But when I heard that it was Cynthia Erivo, I was like, oh, she's going to kill it as Elphaba. I feel much better about this. I might have questions about other things, but Cynthia Erivo absolutely delivered above and beyond what I thought she was going to do. She brings so much to Elphaba, and I loved being able to just like experience her version of Elphaba. It's so deep, it's so meaningful. She's an incredible actress and singer. The production design, incredible. So yeah, I think all in all, it's very well done. I'm glad that we watched it. It's not the thing that I love, and that is okay. And so that's what I just had to like keep telling myself. Like, it's very, very good and enjoyable. It's not the soundtrack version that I'm going to listen to. I'm going to revert back to my old stuff because I'm stuck in my ways. But it is very well done. It's very honoring of the original stage play. You can tell just the heart and effort that went into making this. And like we just talked about, I'm just glad that people are connecting with this and watching this and just discovering how magical this musical is and how great musical theater can be, and discovering Cynthia Erivo too. Like, so all in all, it's great. Go watch it, go enjoy it. Just, if you're a musical theater nerd, you might have to be like me and just self-talk the entire time so that you don't like turn your nose up at this movie, but there's so much good here.
Okay. Wow. Good job. The self-talk sounds like it was effective.
I had to put in work with this movie.
No, I totally get it though, because I listened to this Hamilton original Broadway cast soundtrack for so long. And then when I went to see it on Broadway, after the original cast was already moved on and they had a different cast, there's the cognitive dissonance, and you have to do that self-talk the whole time of like, this is different. It is good, but it's not It's not the same voices. It's not the same like inflection points and the pauses at the exact times that feel so familiar to you. So I totally get it. And that's why I was very curious if overall this was honoring to the original. It sounds like it was and landed that well. Yeah, I didn't know how I would feel about this going in. A lot of people are very passionate about musicals, and I love it for them. You just see them absolutely light up and glow when they talk about it. And there's just such a passion for musicals. I am not that person, and I recognize that perhaps I don't have a soul because apparently the musicals are the best thing ever and just bring and spark so much joy. So I was like, I don't know, I really might not love this as much as everybody else does going into this. And honestly, for the first hour or so, I think it wasn't doing it for me. I was entertained, like it's big, it's splashy, it's fat, it's flashy. There's so much to look at. The set designs are beautiful and stunning. The singing is great, which sometimes it's not in some of these filmed musicals. That can be kind of hit or miss sometimes. So all of that was working well. Like I could feel like it was very good quality. It just wasn't particularly like hitting for me in the way that I know that it does for a lot of people. And then Cynthia Erivo has some incredible songs and incredible character moments. And I was like, okay, I think I get it now. I'm beginning to see kind of the magic of these characters being brought to life. And so I think part of my one sentence summary focusing so much on her is because she brings really for me the emotional core of this movie and for me to get invested and now want to follow her whole journey. I don't like, there's a lot of other characters that I think I'm supposed to be invested in, but I'm just so connected to her now. And I think the way that the film brought those emotional moments to life in certain songs which we'll talk about really helped land that well. So yeah, I think for the second half and maybe specifically the last 45 minutes or so, I was like really beginning to buy into this storyline and this journey for her. So it's when they go to Oz and that whole big turning point in the story that it really starts to really move and have legs for me. The big thought that I kept having, honestly, in the back of my mind cognitively throughout this movie is constantly comparing what things are being done in this filmed version that are being brought to life in a way that couldn't be on a stage, and some of those big set pieces and how that was working for people that really do love the stage musical version. Like, does the hot air balloon like really work for you, or is it kind of distracting and a little bit too much? So that was something that was interesting too, because I recognize I don't have the comparison point to the staged version. So I'm just experiencing this movie, but what does that feel like in such a different medium with a stage and sets and limitations of physical space where you don't have CGI and all of that? I think it totally changes the experience. So thinking about that was constantly in the back of my mind throughout this movie too.
Yeah, and I think that this movie does a really good job at showcasing those things that you can't showcase, in a theater. Like, obviously we have these close-up shots of people's faces and these characters emoting. And again, this whole episode is just going to be me talking about how great Cynthia Erivo is. But she can act so much with just her eyes, and there are so many close-up shots of her face, and sometimes it's just her observing what's going on, and there are paragraphs coming from her eyes. And it was just so great to see this film showcase her just immense talent as an actress. And so I loved all of those, and I think that obviously there's a lot in that goes into the cinematography and showcasing all of these like big musical numbers and all of that, which is obviously very different. But I loved all of those really intimate, close moments with Elphaba, and you can just see everything that she's feeling and what she's processing through in that moment, and just showcasing Cynthia Erivo, just incredible.
Incredible. Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, there's so many moments with her that I'm excited to talk about. So we'll give a spoiler alert, I suppose. If you haven't seen Wicked, the musical in general, or the filmed version now, this is your spoiler alert. We're diving right in. And also, this musical has been around for like 20 plus years, what, 22 years now? I think it premiered in 2003. So, man, it's been 2 decades with the story, and this movie's been out for a bit. So we're diving right in. One of the Cynthia, oh my gosh, words are hard today. Erivo moments that I really loved, where I think this is where I was like, oh, okay, I'm so bought into this. And specifically her is when she does the I'm Not That Girl entire musical sequence. And she is, I love what you said, paragraphs are pouring out from her eyes and she's emoting so much, and it's so aligned with the music. And I also thought that the way that this filmed version staged that whole sequence of being able to have the physical space to follow her as she's watching from afar, Glinda interact with the guy that she's developing feelings for, and constantly watching from afar, I thought added a lot to the emotions of that moment, the subtext and kind of the context for her feeling that's being expressed through song. And something that I was wondering, like, in the stage version, you're much more limited by space, but throughout this kind of montage sequence throughout this song, we get to see so many more places and moments where she's longing for this person that she can't have and this person that she wants to be but can never be. And so the way that that's cut together, the choice of including, even in that final melody that she sings, a super quick shot of Glinda like running off into the distance in the light. It's so fast and quick, but I thought the pacing of the editing, the choice of shot structure worked really well to actually add a lot to that song for me. So I'm curious how that song specifically is for you, especially knowing kind of the staging and maybe blocking of how that's sometimes portrayed in the staged version and how that compares to the filmed version.
Yeah, I thought they did really, really well with that song. Just, I think it speaks to, again, that like love for this original musical and wanting to do it justice and honor this thing that is beloved by so many millions and has won all of these awards and like all of these things. And I feel like this film does that so well. I was just again impressed by Cynthia Erivo and her range. Her vocal range is insane. And there's some notes in that song that like it seems simple, but it's not the easiest song in the world to sing, and it can really stretch the lower part of your range, and you don't hear any of that in her voice. She is absolutely effortless with how she sings, and whether she's singing Defying Gravity or I'm Not That Girl or anything else, like there is this effortlessness to her voice, and I don't know how big her range is, but it seems like every single note is in her range. And I was kind of amazed in that song just how seemingly easy it was for her to sing all of that. And obviously there's all of the emotion in there as well, but there's just no straining in her voice at all. And I was really just taken by that, because sometimes especially in movie musicals, you'll be listening to something and you'll be like, oh, that's nearing the end of your range there, but you're getting it out. But man, not with Cynthia Erivo. She does fantastic.
Yeah. And I think the other interesting thing with filmed musicals is that sometimes the scale of their voice is just limited by the medium you're experiencing it in, compared to obviously live theater where you're just immersed in a specific note that is held, or an outpouring of music coming from the singers on stage. And in Defying Gravity, through my not so great quality audio system, like I still felt pummeled and immersed and swept away by her voice. And the fact that somehow is translating through this medium is pretty fascinating. So I just thought that was something that was also notable to me, is how much the like bigness and roundness of her voice is able to translate through a medium that it sometimes doesn't translate as well in, where you clearly feel like, okay, this is recorded in a space and it's now being transported into my ears, versus no, I was swept away by her voice in Defying Gravity when she sings that at the end.
And I think one of the reasons why this film sounds so good is because they sang songs live. And it makes a huge difference. And obviously, like, some of it was, they do magic in editing and all of that. But I think it makes such a difference when you have an actress and a singer as good as Cynthia Erivo. Let her sing live, because it changes everything about the performance. And then the other thing that I really appreciated about the way that this sounds is how full everything was. And that is one of the things that's very different on the like original cast recording, just because of the limitations of space. And so with the movie, they were able to have a much like fuller orchestra, and you can hear that all throughout. And so there were certain points where I was like, oh yes, I love just the bigness and the fullness. And you can really hear all of these instruments coming through that you don't really hear all the time in the original cast recording. So that was just something that I loved. It made my musical theater heart so happy, just how big and full everything was. And I feel like it's such a good way to experience so many of these songs.
That's a fascinating point. Yeah, because once again, they're no longer constrained by the limitations of the other medium. That's one of the things that's always so fun and interesting to compare and think about is when a musical is put to the screen. There's possibilities that are opened up, and there's also constraints and things that are more challenging to land as well, because the medium is so different. So it's always fascinating to see what they choose to do. I'm curious if one of those sequences that felt big and full for you was the whole Emerald City sequence where they're taking the train into the city and then they're getting to see and experience Oz for the first time. And I thought that the scale of sound matched the scale of visual spectacle in this filmed version. You know, we are literally being led through these like swirling figures from a POV shot. Literally, there's groups of people. It's like you're walking. A parade is not going past you. You are walking like literally in the middle of the parade as the dancers and different segments are walking past you. And I thought that the way that, because this is now a filmed musical, they were able to showcase the scale of the Emerald City and the grandeur and all of the different colorful personalities and costumes and set pieces. They could really show that off more and kind of put you in the perspective of what it must have been like being Alfie or Glinda and experiencing the Emerald City for the first time and all that wonder. So I thought that was a sequence that was notable for me that felt big and could be big because this is now on the big screen and not on a stage.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite parts in the entire movie, and this is just my musical theater heart, is seeing Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth in this. And it was such a nice touch, and like them, obviously they are both incredible, and you got to see them just showing off how great they are, but also as a really sweet like passing of the torch, because I mean, I am stuck in my ways and I still love the original version, but it's just nice to see so many of the, you know, alums of Wicked being able to contribute to this in some way. I also read that some of the alum were able to contribute to some of like the background vocals and singing. And it's just, I love that, because this musical has meant so much to so many people, and then seeing that the OGs are also just as excited about this movie as you know, everybody else involved in the production. So it was such a nice touch. They are both incredible, but it was really sweet to see, and I don't know, I loved seeing them. It made my heart so happy.
Yes. And the movie knows what it's doing too, because not only are they there, but there's a specific shot where they're each like fixing the costume of the respective characters,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, it feels so tender and such a, like you mentioned, such a physical way to pass the torch. They're not just here, but they're here literally next to the characters that they were associated with and aligned to. And so getting that little moment, I was like, oh, you know exactly what heartstrings to pull, and it's working. It's working well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That was warm fuzzies.
Oh, absolutely. All the warm fuzzies in that moment. But to your point, the production design in this film is just off the charts. Like, holy crap, this thing is beautiful. And everything is so intricate, from the costumes to the buildings. Like, it's just wonderful to look at. And you can just see the talent and the craftsmanship on display through all of these little details. And when you actually go to Oz and we get to see this entirely new world, your senses are almost overwhelmed because there's so many new sights and sounds, and the costumes look so different, and we're encountering different types of people. And it was just, I'm blown away by the production design in this. It adds so much to this, and you can just tell the care that they put into every single one of these little details.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And you can just see how much like every background actor is having like the time of their life, Like I just kept thinking about how like I just want to be on set. Like how magical and incredible would it be to just get to like inhabit like a version of this world with all of these people getting to do the dance numbers together and stage blocking and all of that goodness. Just how fun. How fun, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the energy in this is just absolutely electric.
It's so good. That's so good. So one of the things I was curious about is your thoughts about Ariana Grande as Glinda, because I don't know the original story, but she can act more than I thought I ever knew that she could act, so that was fascinating to see. But the character is so thinly portrayed, and I wonder if like that is the point and that is intentional, or if it's a byproduct of like what Ariana Grande is bringing to this performance, because she really feels like such a supporting character. There's not a lot there, and I was wondering if there was more depth or believability in that performance and the like friendship that's blossoming between the two of them, if I would buy into it a little bit more, because they are like counters to each other and kind of the two opposite sides of the spectrum that like finally come together. And had maybe her other side been a little bit stronger, that all of those moments would have felt more emotional to me, of when they're talking about friendship and coming together all of a sudden. And I don't know, I was just kind of like, really? That was fast. And also like, she was shitty to you half a scene ago. So the believability, I think, was a little bit distracting for me to really like buy into the emotional dynamics that I think I was supposed to be feeling at the time. So I'm curious your thoughts on what Ariana brings to this performance.
Yeah, I was skeptical of Ariana Grande. Granted, she doesn't sing the type of music that I listen to, so I haven't listened to much of her, but I wasn't sure that she'd be able to like keep up with Cynthia Erivo, and she does much better than I thought that she was going to. I think she does a fine job. I think it's difficult when you're paired with such a phenomenal actress. So I think she is like the weaker link of the two, but I don't think she gave a bad performance. Galinda is shallow and vapid and this popular girl, and I think a lot of that comes through really, really well. And I do think that Galinda is a really important character, especially in this version of Wicked. Especially, I don't know, at least for me, I was thinking about, after watching this, like, in what ways am I a Galinda? Like, when I see, other people suffering or struggling or being bullied, like, how can I use my privilege and my voice to like honor them and help them and not be a Galinda? So I think for me, I was maybe looking past her performance and trying to get to some of those like deeper introspective themes that this film is trying to communicate, and then just focusing on Cynthia Erivo, honestly. I was like, okay, focus on her. She's doing great. Because I've never really liked Galinda all that much either. Like, she's never been the one that I like came to this musical for. It's always been Elphaba. But yeah, I think for me, Ariana does a great job, but she just, man, compared to Cynthia Erivo, it's hard for anybody, I think, to compare to Cynthia Erivo in their performance.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that was so clearly woven into this version of the film, and I was, again, this is my experience of Wicked, so I'm curious if it's so heavily in the actual original show, but there's so much in here around the privileged being so oblivious of the dynamics that are around them. You know, I thought the scene was particularly notable that they spent screen time on, of her sharing that she is now advocating for the animals by choosing to change her name. And she feels genuinely so impressed with herself. And she feels like she's done a lot and done so much, and receiving all the flowers and the praise and making a big splash about her advocacy for those that she quote unquote seems to claim to care about. And so there's a lot that's like very pointed and really not that subtle. Like it's clearly there. If you have a brain, you can like really figure it out. And so I was like, is that new, or is that part of the original version and is now being like brought to life even more in this version? But I appreciate all those sequences because I think that they offer a lot to think about, not just here's two women that are at the school together and navigating social dynamics. No, this is a reflection of unequal systems in society, actually. And that's all so baked in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely in the original musical. I think for me, it's definitely amplified because Cynthia Erivo is a Black woman. And I think that just brings just an interesting dynamic to this film as well. And so then seeing this like white blonde girl, you know, trying to be an advocate and just doing all of the things that we see so many like white women do when they're trying to be advocates, including me. I mean, there's so many times when I'm trying to help and I just do it wrong. But I love that this film really emphasizes those things. And if you want to have a moment of introspection, there's a lot here to think about. There are so many themes in both the movie and the musical around like, what does it look like to, you know, use your privilege to help other people? What are the ways that our society scapegoats people? How do the powerful use propaganda to turn people against each other? Like, there's so much here. There's so much meat to this, both the musical and the movie. And I love that. I love that musicals exist. They're not just bright and colorful and fun and beautiful, but there's these weightier, really relevant themes that we can dive into and like really sink our teeth into and consider, and that a musical can be used to point out these parts in our society that really aren't great. And if we want to, it's an opportunity to think more deeply on these things and even take action, and not in a Galinda way, but in a much better way, and help to, you know, co-create a more equitable world for everybody. And it's all in there, which is just wild, in addition to some really great songs and everything.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I appreciate that it's you don't really have to look that far for it, you know, like it's pretty clear in some sequences, and obviously there's some other more subtle dynamics that are happening, but there's some moments where you're like, this movie is not trying to be subtle. Like, it's really looking to invite you very clearly to think and reflect and ponder. I think it's like in the first 30 minutes or so, there's a whole sequence when Elphaba says to Glinda, offering to help someone you don't know with skills you don't have is pretty audacious. And, the dynamics of the privileged thinking, trying, believing that they are helping is so clearly laid out there. And the thing is too, like, I think we buy that Galinda genuinely just is ignorant and does not know. I think the believability of that is also key to capturing the societal dynamics here as well. Like, she's not evil. She's not looking to manipulate or corrupt these social dynamics. It's very much just focused on her own glory and admiration at the cost of others. And so I think that is also a fascinating way that she is written to be kind of airheaded and ignorant and completely oblivious, but there's a cost to that. And the movie's not shy. The movie's just not shy about any of it. And I love that it's not, because it knows that a lot of people are going to see this, and it's using this opportunity to really highlight these very real dynamics and shed some light on them.
Yeah. And do it in such a fun way too. I love that this movie is so fun, and there's a lot of joy in it. There's also some really hard stuff in it. And all of these themes are so well integrated into everything else. So it doesn't feel like, this musical is like, okay, we had our fun and now I'm going to wag my finger at you about some things, but it's all integrated because it's all so character based. And it's really obvious. And if you want to do that work, the film welcomes you to do that work. And if not, you have a really fun musical that you just watched.
You can choose to ignore it, but you have to do a lot of work.
Yeah, it's hard.
Okay, other big things that stood out to you in Wicked.
So I while we're kind of on this vein of deeper themes in this film, I wonder if the casting of Michelle Yeoh as Madame Morrible is helping to make, maybe a larger statement about our world today. There's been so many instances throughout our history where Asian populations and the Black population have been at odds with one another. And I just wonder if Madame Morrible, played by an Asian woman, then turning against a Black woman, a green woman, is the film trying to point at that in the way that sometimes other marginalized groups allow themselves to be turned against each other by the empire and by whiteness. I don't know, I might be reading way too much into the casting of this movie, but that was just something that I was wondering afterwards, is are there some deeper meanings here in maybe some of the casting choices, or maybe those casting choices are just maybe bringing out some of these themes maybe in a different way? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about that as well. And I think that was such an intentional choice. And specifically the way that the systems that are in power, in this case, the wizard, is using and employing and pitting them against each other as well, and using perceptions of favor or of gaining some slight sense of privilege, and then kind of weaponizing that against the other people groups that are part of society. It's, I think, definitely part of the social hierarchy and dynamics that are being explored here. And it's so intentional and so subtle about that. I think that is a dynamic that maybe isn't as explicitly expressed through lines of dialogue, right? But if you are with it and you read and you understand and you are observant and connected to the dynamics of society, I think all of that will feel very resonant. And in a lot of ways, there's the other layer of the animals that are a part of this as well. And the way that all three of these tiers, and we haven't even explored much. I don't know if they explored in this part 2, but like, how are the Munchkins treated? How are the other people groups that are considered other and don't fall into the typical Ozian citizen? How are those dynamics also shaking out too? It's definitely interesting to think about. But the way that the systems in power pit these people groups against each other, I think, is so much baked into these very smart and clever casting choices to highlight some of those dynamics. Yeah, I don't think you're a way off. I think you're picking up on something that is very real and very accurate in society.
It was so funny. I was thinking about this movie after the credits rolled, and I was like, Sarah, calm down. Just stop. No. Chill out. That makes me feel better. Yeah.
Ooh. So interesting. And so that's why the thing that I love about this, and I'm sure this is part of the thinking of these, like, the creative team, and this is that they know they're gonna bring in butts and seats for this movie. And so to choose to use the power and influence of a film like this to so intentionally highlight these dynamics that are reflective of society, I just think is so amazing and really incredible. And using the one thing that we love talking about the pod, like using this medium of movies and entertainment as forces of, yes, to entertain us because we are all here for a great time and some spectacle, but then to also use it as a way to usher in these larger dynamics that are reflective of very real social dynamics in a way that feels accessible and palatable. And especially for a film like this that has so much sway and has attention and eyeballs and immediate audience engagement from literally the masses and every generation, I just think it's so smart to use the influence of something like this for something good, you know? Oh my gosh, meta theme, using the powers of this film for good, just like Alphabet's learning to do as well.
Wow. Yes. Nailed
I was
it.
spinning that and I was like, wait, okay, this kind of works.
You killed it.
Oh, man.
Another one of those themes that I really loved, and I feel like it's not super prominent, but it just resonated with where I am in my life right now, is when Dr. Dilmond is teaching and really emphasizing the importance of teaching history. And I loved that. Like, I remember when I was a kid and all through school, I didn't want to learn history. Like, that was one of the subjects that I was like, ugh, I don't want this. I don't need this. So I would just like memorize facts for a test, and then it would just like leave my brain immediately. And now as an adult, like, I'm actively seeking out to learn from history. So just his whole spiel about the importance of history. And I think it's also valuable because he is older than all of his students, and a lot of his students other than Alphaba are like, they're like I was when I was a teenager and not wanting to learn history. But it's so important that we don't forget these lessons and we don't forget what has happened previously, because it all informs our present. And I loved that little bit when he was teaching.
Yeah, especially the like generational divide that can sometimes happen, you know, like feeling like there's obviously a disconnect that often the older generation has from current times dynamics that are great and are emerging and are valuable, but also the respect that the younger generations have for the wisdom that comes from having seen and experienced a lot too. Like, there's a mutual respect there that sometimes is just challenging because the world is changing so much, and like generation to generation, like literally every part of our society looks so different in the pace of technology changing, the social dynamics, all of it. But this film is really looking to kind of advocate for that as well. Yeah, I think that was a really beautiful moment. And especially coming from a character that in the world of Oz is perceived to be sometimes lesser than or kind of outdated, like representing an older ideology that for a lot of the young students feels like it's out of touch. And for him to be respected and valued by our main character, I think is significant for all of the younger generation is also experiencing this movie as well and seeing the value of Elphaba, recognizing the wisdom that he has to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that ability to learn from somebody else, listen to somebody else, hear what they're saying. Like there's so much about Elphaba that you can just learn so much from, and just the way that she shows up in the world and the way that she advocates for herself and for others. And just the other thing that I kept thinking about while watching is the importance of empathy. There's a point later on in the film where she's like, do you think I want to be like this? And I think one of Elphaba's superpowers is her ability to empathize with other people. And we don't really see that from anybody else in this film. And I think that's another really important aspect of this story is, you know, our world doesn't like empathy, and we shouldn't feel deeply. We shouldn't empathize with people. You know, it's competition and every person for themselves and all of that. But empathy is such a beautiful thing that we can have for everybody else. And I love the way that we see that show up all throughout Elphaba's story, and just those ways that really it is a superpower that we can have when we show up in the world and are able to empathize with others. And I love that we get to see that from her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's neat too because she is unaware of that superpower as well, and may not be able to see how it can be used for good. And so I think a lot of Elphaba's journey throughout at least this first half, especially, and likely throughout the rest of the story, is also her learning her identity and not viewing it from the lens of shame as well, because society has spoken that over her time and time again, treated her as different because of the color of her skin. And it's interesting because Michelle Yeoh's character and kind of the wizard are painting the narrative that is so clearly shame-based. Like, it is dripping with literally every reeking odor and aroma and gunk of shame by saying that the color of her skin is tied to an internal twistedness. Like, talk about like cutting through to all of the stuff to just like shooting right at the heart of your identity and who you believe you are and who you are on the inside being expressed in this way outwardly. And so by the end of the film, when she's singing Defying Gravity, it really is this breaking free from those lies that have been spoken over and the lies that she's believed herself, and embracing this new identity and feeling like there's power, there is good that she sees, that she's advocating for, and she's limitless, you know? And so I think that's a fascinating journey that is relatable as well, of debunking the lies that have been believed by you, and that setting you free truly to go and pour out and be an advocate for others fully, and kind of to be fearless in that. So I think that aspect is obviously so human and so relatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved that line from Galinda where she says, it's after they share their secrets, and Galinda says to Elphaba, that might be your secret, but that doesn't make it true. And I thought that was just so powerful, because Elphaba has been believing lies about herself her entire life and has internalized these things that are simply not true. And so we're just watching her as she is walking through all of these different scenarios and hopefully undoing some of those lies that she's come to believe about herself.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, for so much of this movie, Glinda was just getting on my every nerve. So that was a rare moment where I was like, all right, okay, you're contributing something to this whole... Yeah. Because Elphaba is doing the most, helping this poor girl emotionally grow and develop and become open-minded, become empathetic, you know? And so it was neat to see this moment where Glinda could also speak life into and encourage an identity over Elphaba as well, and kind of uproot these lies for her and call them out and say, like, this is not you. Like, I know it has felt so real to you for so long, but this is not you. And I see you so different. And helping Elphaba see that for herself too. Because up until that point, I was like, what is this girl contributing? Okay, like, she's just the worst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she's supposed to be the worst, so it works. Yeah, she is comedic relief and also the worst, and sometimes has some real moments of clarity and like, wow, that was insightful and profound, and then she just goes back to being herself again.
I was curious your thoughts on the choice of timing to end part 1, and if it's aligned to the way that the intermission happens in the musical, or if because it's always fascinating when they do these like part 1, part 2s, like for example, Dune and the Fast X movie and the Spider-Verse #2 movie, right? We're doing a lot. We're in the midst of a lot of like middle section stuff where there's like a second part or a third part to come. And where they choose to end is always really interesting to me. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, or if that's just standard honoring by the books of how the musical does it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the end of Act 1 is Defying Gravity. So it follows it, and it's just it's funny when this movie was first coming out and we learned that there was part 1 and part 2. I feel like all of the musical theater people were like, "Oh yeah, it's ending after Defying Gravity." Like we all knew where this was going. But yeah, that is where it ends, and
nice.
They did it right.
They did it right. Good. We love to see that, you know? Like, stay faithful to the original. And if you're not going to, you better do something real interesting if you're going to shake things up, because you better make some people mad and have some feelings about it. So better be worth it. So it sounds like this one chose to really stay faithful and honoring of the original.
Yeah, and it does make quite a few changes, like, obviously, because it is a different thing than the stage musical. And so there are some songs that are different, of course, that I was like, this is not it. But it obviously works for the movie. It is the movie version, and that's great. It's okay. It's allowed. You know, I don't have to be the wicked police and, you know, be upset because they changed something to make it more cinematic. So that was just, there are a lot of differences, and I am choosing to be okay with them and to focus on the parts that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's me trying to grow as a person. I'm trying to not be like Galinda, and I'm trying to grow as a person.
Open-minded, there we go. You know?
I'm trying really hard.
You just have like a whole running track in your brain. Like,
honestly, though,
half of your brain cells are watching this movie, the other half are convincing the other brain cells that this is good.
Yes. Basically, it was my self-talk of like, this is okay, this is all right, like, you don't have to be upset. And then the other half was like, oh my gosh, we need to sing all the songs. And I was like, no, Sarah, watch the movie. I was a whole mess while watching this. It was probably really entertaining. If anybody had been in the room watching me trying to watch this film, they probably would have had a great time.
Yep. I love it. Okay, any other big things we wanted to mention before we wrap? Time flew.
Time did fly. I have some silly little things.
Okay, let's hear them.
Did you notice any pinky rings in this movie?
I did. Elphaba has her pinky ring.
Yeah, she has two.
I didn't know there was two.
Yeah,
I definitely
has one on both pinkies.
When there was a literal close-up shot of Galinda holding her hand, and I was like, great thing the females are not included in our data set. So
exactly. And I think it also works in a way because she, by the end of the movie, becomes like the scapegoat.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, my theory is that if a white male if a straight white male wears a pinky ring in a movie, he is the bad guy. Women don't always follow that same vein, but there is a white male who wears a pinky ring in this film.
I mean, it wouldn't be as obvious as the wizard, would it?
It is as obvious as the wizard. The wizard has a pinky ring.
Oh my gosh, that's a great data point. Mm-hmm. position of power, has a kind of an inferiority complex, a massive one. He built a whole mechanical face, so got a lot to prove, you know?
Yep.
The pink ring wasn't enough. We had to build a whole animatronic version of her face.
Yes.
Yeah, to garner respect.
As one does. Come on, Jen. You telling me you don't have a giant animatronic face and like propaganda just constantly pumping out how great you are?
With like these yellow eyes. Oh,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, well done on the ShamWow team for him. Like, had a propagandist doing some work.
Right?
Yo, probably. I mean, that's definitely not his idea. He's not smart enough to figure that out. It was definitely a Madame Morrible. Okay. Any other what else is on your list of silly little things?
No, I think that was my main silly thing.
Let's go. Our 2 pinky rings.
Our 2 pinky ring data points.
And
it's lovely.
Really great contrasting ones to confirm the thesis. I love when
though.
Data confirms what we already hypothesized. It's so inconvenient when there's a, contradictory one. And we have to think about it. It's great when it confirms and validates.
It's also helpful because then we narrow our hypothesis. Our hypothesis gets better the more data we get, even if it's inconvenient.
I just don't want to do more thinking.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. we want to be like Fierro because, life is life is better when you're just not thinking,
Yeah, you got to confront your whole life's value systems and privilege. He's doing some good work. He needs to move a little faster, okay, my dude? But okay, you're trying. You get points for that, I suppose.
What he doesn't get points for is stepping on books and throwing them. That is not okay behavior. I don't care how charming you are. No. You leave those poor books alone.
I'm like, look. Elsa has put her whole hand on your cheek. Like, if that's not the sign you need to know what's happening here, I don't know what to tell you, my dude. Like, you need to figure it out, because she has made her stance clear, and you're smart enough to know. So, don't be playing these games anymore. Giving her looks from across the school courtyard. None of that, please. Don't play with her heart.
Yeah. She was clear.
She was very clear.
So, what you do with that information is up to you, buddy.
Yeah, and he's not doing very much with it, so.
No.
But there's a whole second part, so.
There is a second part. Is there anything, well, number 1, are you excited to see part 2? And number 2, is there anything that you would like to see in part 2?
Oh.
Ooh.
2 hours of Cynthia Erivo, please.
Honestly, though.
Maybe some, munchkins doing big dance numbers in Oz. That would be great, and I'd be happy.
Excellent. You are in luck because Cynthia Erivo is Elphaba in part 2, so we have that.
Well, I don't actually know a lot of the plot. I do know that she becomes a scapegoat and become the whole narrative that's formed around her in The Wizard of Oz it's formed here and all that goodness. But I am curious to see where they choose to have Glinda's whole plotline run, because she is very much just non-committal to anything right now. And I think that's going to be fascinating to see. I mean, it's a musical, so I'm like, I think a lot of open plot lines are going to get tied up real tight and in nice little bows. So I think that'll be satisfying to watch. I am honestly, Sarah, I'm just waiting to hear For Good. Like, that was one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack, and experiencing Defying Gravity with the context of the character arcs now was so thrilling that I'm just excited to be my feels as For Good unfolds in front of my eyeballs and into my ear. So I don't know where it falls in the show, so I just keep waiting for all the ones that I know that I really love. And so I was like, there's no way they're going to sing this for now, because she has not been changed for good, and she hasn't published it yet. So I'm like, this is definitely like we're getting to the end. We've gone on a whole journey. She's grown, where she gets to sing it. But I think that's going to hit me real good, and I'm very excited for that. Is there anything that you're excited to see now that you have done 2 hours and a half of self-taught work. We are warming up to this. We are ready and open-minded to receive now. Anything you want to see?
So my favorite song in the musical is in Act 2. And I am very excited to hear Cynthia Erivo's version of that song. She's going to do such a good job with it. I'm so excited.
Are we going to leave the song vague?
I mean, it's No Good Deed, which I don't know if that's anybody's favorite song, but it's definitely my favorite song. And she's just going to kill it. So that's the thing that I'm honestly most excited for, is to hear her sing No Good Deed.
Okay.
Because it's going to be killer. I'm ready.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So all of her things, we just want to see more of Cynthia Erivo. I would like to see less flying monkey jump scares, okay? I was not ready for that one in this movie. I jumped out of my bones. Like, I was not prepared, okay? So well done to the editors and the pacing of that, because you got me good. You got me well. So good job. See, in a horror movie, I'm like bracing myself too, you know?
Yeah. This one, it lulled you to sleep with its musicalness, and then it got you.
Yeah. Honestly, I was just staring at the CGI monkey.
Yeah.
I was kind of enthralled by wow, how did they do this? And
right?
Oh, the details of the feathers are really crisp. Technology's crazy. And then boom, a monkey just, smacks me in the face. So that was fun. I would like less of that though. But I'm maybe not prepared, so I'm ready. Give me all the flying monkeys in my face.
Yeah. Now we know they exist. Now we know that jump scares exist in this cinematic universe.
Yeah.
You will be on guard.
I am ready. Can't fool me once, joke's on me, but fool me twice and I'm the problem. So I'm ready. All right.
Excellent.
Well, this was our review and discussion of Wicked. You can find it available to stream on multiple streaming platforms at this point. I think it's also still on theaters as well, perhaps. I'm sure this has got a long run. So yeah, check out this movie. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review letting us know your thoughts about Wicked, the filmed version. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at MoviesAndUsPod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to continue our run of films that have been nominated for Oscars, and we will be discussing the film The Wild Robot. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.